Yesterday we learned about, last 2 days, we've been learning about the Hanukkah candles, the Hanukkah lights, and the special miracle of Hanukkah. And where the Jews got their power to stand against tens of thousands of Greeks and to win, and why we only symbolize this with light. And even more, how the Jews existed all this time when we don't have those lights in the Holy Temple. We don't even have the Holy Temple. So one used to have the Holy Temple, and the Jews were in Israel. So then the Jews had this central place that they could all go and identify with, and etc. That's talking about the politically. But after that, what about spiritually? Spiritually, they went to the temple. They would feel that there's a creator. They would feel that there is a God, that they would feel the God who took them out of Egypt, who gave them the Torah. They would feel in the first temple more, in the second temple a little bit less. But still it was possible to go to a place and feel that this place, like every other place in the world, is just a creation, and that God is creating it, and He's creating it for a reason. And He cares about every detail in the world. You could feel it. Of course, correspondingly, there was also selfish influences, selfish impulses that were involved in the world. In other words, the choice was a more, they say, drastic choice. You could either choose pure godliness and to be totally devoted to the Creator of the universe with love and with fear. And correspondingly, there was also a feeling to oppose that service of God. And nowadays, there's not such a big revelation of godliness in a way, in a revealed way. So as a result, but I think that the impulses to go against are the same, even though it says that nowadays we have no way of understanding how powerful was, for instance, the desire of idolatry. In the first temple especially, there was a tremendous urge floating around in the world for idolatry. Like now, I guess people want money and they want things like that. Well, back then they also wanted money, but the same way that people want money now or other pleasures, is the desire was 100 times more to worship idols. So that was in the first temple. So we sort of don't have much of an idea of exactly what were the temptations and difficulties and challenges that were in those times. But it suffices to say that in the middle of the second temple, when the Greeks took over the whole world, so the Jews basically joined them. Enough for this being a separate people and a chosen people and the sons of God and all these things. Let's just be normal. There was just a handful of Jews that said, no, we don't care about the obstacles. We don't care about the darkness and the difficulties and the challenges. We're going to be good Jews. So we can't, 13 Jews can't defeat 30,000 Greeks, right? Okay, so that's what nature says, but we're not paying attention to that. We're not paying attention to that. And they made this war, and just paying attention to the good, to what Judaism is, and they won. And that's the whole. Now that also shows on the victory that's going to be for Mashiach. Right now we have a lot of Jews that don't want to have anything to do with Judaism. I don't know if it's the same proportion as it was back then in the time of Greece. I don't think so. I think there's many more Jews nowadays that are, they're not necessarily wearing, Hasidic garments or whatever, but still that are doing commandments and doing this than there were back then. I don't know. In any case, the power that kept them going is the same power that's keeping us going. So now we're in the time of exile. The time of exile is we don't have all these revelations. We don't have what's called the influence from what's called the 7 shepherds of Judaism. But we do have influence from what's called the 8 anointed men. This is a power which is above normal, a power which is above nature, that inspires Jews to do what God says, above nature, above logic, above any Greek influence, above any logical considerations and philosophical considerations. Just, I'm a Jew. That's all. I don't care. You can bring all the logic you want, all the proof you want. You can be as powerful as you want. I can be as weak as you want, but I am not going to leave my Judaism. That power comes from what's called the 8 anointed men. It's above death, so to speak. It's above death, not above physical death. I mean, a lot of Jews were killed, but nevertheless, for some reason, totally unexplainable, Jews are willing to give their lives for God. And it could be totally non-religious Jews. It could be the opposite. It could be that a religious Jew, he'll start making considerations and think, no, it's worthwhile to live. Why should I get burned on the stake? I'll be a Jew in quiet, etc. And the simple Jews all of a sudden wakes up something that's totally opposite of his whole, all of the considerations he made in his whole life, and he'll say, I'm giving my life for God. So that's the 8 anointed men. That's what we said before. That's 8 anointed men. And then we said over here in this paragraph that that's the whole idea of Chanukah. In Chanukah, that the Greeks came and defiled the oil. The Greeks came and tried to make everything natural, nature, intellect, philosophy, understanding. And they tried to take away this feeling of that there's God and God cares and God creates the world and God gives the Torah and there's all these commandments and all these illogical ideas that just how do you say, wreck up your life. You can't go to the plays like everybody else. You can't eat the same food as everybody else. You can't. Why not? You have an urge to eat a big lobster. Why not eat a lobster? What's the problem? What's the problem? It says God says you shouldn't do it. Come on. Really? You really believe God? What type of a God is that he cares about eating lobster? All these logical reasons that they had, and they were really powerful logical reasons, especially the most powerful reason was that the Greeks ruled the world. And nevertheless, they didn't pay any attention to this. And like true fanatics, maniacs, they fought against the whole Greek army only in order to light this oil. But it wasn't only that. It was that there shouldn't be this Greek influence at all in Judaism. Shouldn't be at all in Judaism. Exactly. There should be a Jewish influence in Greeks, right? Put God into the thoughts of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates and Spinoza and all these people, right? And that's it. They're all just blown away. All their ideas are blown away, but not all of them. I mean, there's some of them that are usable. Some good advice could be, but if it's natural advice, it cannot be ultimate advice. Can't be. It can be practical advice, right? In certain situations. Says the Rebbe, if so, now we can understand the argument that we started off with, the argument between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. How to dispel this darkness? Beit Shammai says the first night we have to light 8 candles, Beit Shammai, and then from there we go in and get less. And it gives them the Gemara. The Gemara, it's in Shabbos, in like page 21 or something in Shabbos. The reason for Beit Shammai is the Yolach that he learns out, Mipari Achag, from the oxen, the 70 oxen which are offered up in the Holy Temple in the holiday of Sukkot. In the holiday of Sukkot, they offer 70 oxes up. Every day should be 10, right? But they don't do 10. The first day they offer up 13, and then 12 and 11, 10, 9, 8. So it comes up in the 7 days, it comes out altogether 70. Right? The first day they offer up 13, and the last day they offer up 7. So it comes out an average of 10 every day. And so it is the next day, second day, they offer up the 12 oxes, and the second to the last day is 8. So it comes out to be so, but it gets less and less every day. Sheom Rishon, that the first day, why the reason is because of the oxes of the holiday of Sukkot. And now is Sukkot. What do they call in English? What is it? Tabernacles. On the first day of the holiday of Sukkot in the temple, they offered up 13 oxes. From then, they got less and less. Beit Hillel says no, and this is how we do, like Beit Hillel. Beit Hillel means the house of the school of Hillel. They said the first day you light one candle. So from then on, you continue and you light more. Why? Because, so why doesn't Beit Hillel say like Beit Shammai? What's wrong? We have the oxes of the holiday of Sukkot, and they get less and less every day. So what's wrong with that? That's pretty good. Start off the first day 8, and then get less. And the Hillel says, no. We start off with 1, and then we go up. But just for the sake of being contrary, to argue, no, there's a reason. Hillel does not agree because the whole idea of these oxes of the holiday of Sukkot, that they get less every day. The first day they offer up 13, the next day 12, etc. Is Gamken is also, it's drawing down this level of Makifim Elyonim. This is drawing down this surrounding level of godliness. In other words, to keep the world in proper order, you have to know that God is totally above comprehension. His reality is infinitely more real than our reality. And we just sort of partake of God's reality. He creates us, we don't create him. That's the message of Sukkot. On Sukkot, there's the revelation of this makifim, of this surrounding level of godliness. That's happiness. That's why it's a happy holiday. Sukkot. Like it says, Ki gavar aleinu chazdo, because God's kindness is overpowering us. Al yidei hamshach hazu, by means of this, Meborim is also refined ayin sarim, what's called the 70 chieftain angels, which are the source of all of the inspiration and ideas and motivation of the non-Jews. And it enables, therefore, the non-Jews to also be devoted to the light of God, to be devoted to their Creator. According to the Torah, the non-Jews have what's called 7 Noahide commandments. That's the holiday of Sukkot. The holiday of Sukkot is devoted in a very great part for Jews, bringing blessing to the non-Jews and removing from them their destructive egotism. So it starts off with 13 and gets less and less and less. The first day, there's a tremendous big revelation of godliness, and then doesn't have to have so much afterwards. You will see. That's what we say. Hallelujah, Hashem kol goyim. Praise God, all of the nations. Ki gavar aleinu chazdo, because there was great kindness on us. What does it mean on us? That we in the Holy Temple draw down God's kindness to the world, God's love. And this is drawn down to the world. The world is the non-Jews. So they feel God's kindness, they feel God's goodness. And this takes away their desire to have war and destructive and addictions and depressions and all these other things. Look, and therefore, Matchil B'Yud Gimel, therefore we start with 13 oxes. Corresponding to the 13 attributes of mercy, the 13 attributes of mercy, Shehem Makifim, that these are surrounding levels, as we know. God's 13 attributes of mercy says that after the Jews worshiped the golden calf, so God said, that's it. There's no worse sin than that. I told them, they all heard in Mount Sinai not to worship idols. I spoke directly to all the Jews. All the Jews heard directly the first 2 commandments. Worship only God that took you out of Egypt, and don't worship idols. They all heard it. And they worshiped idols anyway. They worshiped the golden calf. What am I going to do? I have to destroy them. So Moses prayed, and God said, okay, Salach Kirabarecha, I'll forgive them. So Moses said, do me a favor and teach me how to pray to you in the future. Give me a special prayer. So he gave him what's called the 13 attributes of mercy. And these 13 attributes of mercy, this is a power which, even if the Jews do all the sins possible, and the non-Jews also, as God says, I'll rise above it. I'll rise above. That's what's called surrounding powers. So therefore, the first day there was 13, a big blessing. A big blessing of these 13 attributes of mercy and this level of kindness of God. Then afterward, there gets less and less, because the Gentiles were already refined, the world was already refined by ways of this Hamshacha, should be Om Rishon on the first day. Okay, and therefore, Ein Tzorech Od, Hara Gadoli, you don't have to have such a big revelation the second day. Most of the work has been done the first day. So the second day, you don't have to have as big as the first day does. Hine, in Chanukah, it's the same thing. Beit Shammai says the Chanukah is the same thing. We draw down these surrounding levels of godliness into the whole world by means of this. Nidchim Aklipos, by means of this, there is pushed away all the powers of destruction and selfishness and egotism in the world. So Beit Shammai says the same thing. Let's start out big. 8 days, 8 candles first day, and then we'll get less and less. But on Chanukah, it was a little bit different because on Chanukah, it was a war. Like it says, Sabuni gam sababuni. B'shem Hashem ki amilam. In the name of God, I cut them off. The holiday of Sukkot, God does everything. He brings these blessings down. Remember the holiday of Chanukah, it's true that we draw down these big blessings and we make a light. And we light lights in the holiday of light. But the fact of the matter is that we had to fight a big battle. And this victory also came from this level of the makifim, of the surrounding levels of God. But that's what it means, tov lechasos b'Hashem, yivtoch b'adam. That's what it means. It's better to trust in God than to trust in man. But there was a good thought. We should trust in man because we had to fight against all of these enemies. In Sukkot, everything comes directly from God. The Sukkot is a holiday from the Torah. Sukkot is one of the 3 holidays written in the Torah, one of the 3 times that all the Jewish people had to go up to the Holy Temple. Therefore, it was not by means of a war. In Sukkot, it says that the non-Jews were subjugated automatically by means of this revelation. Automatically. On Sukkot, when the holiday of Sukkot came, it drew down blessing, awareness to the non-Jews, so that they wouldn't oppose the Jews. They would be only constructive, not only constructive. That's ideally, let's take an example, what the United Nations is supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be that all these people sit together and all they want is to be constructive and to help each other and to feed the sick and to heal the sick and to feed the poor and to protect the weak and etc. That's what it's supposed to be. Well, in the holiday of Sukkot, when the Jewish people sacrificed these oxes, so all the non-Jews in the world, suddenly they got inspiration and motivation to, hey, let's do it. That's a good idea. Instead of standing up, some person, a Hitler or someone saying, hey, I got a good idea. Let's destroy the whole world and kill everyone that doesn't agree with us. And everyone says, oh, that's a pretty good idea. Let's do it, right? In the time of the temple, when the Jews were acting the way they were supposed to, if some maniac stood up like that, everybody would say, what's your problem? What is your problem? The world is really wonderful. Let's serve the creator of the universe. Creator, get it? Creator, not destroyer. Creator, that's the God of the Jews. The creator. And he's creating us. That's what it would be in the time of Sukkot. That all of a sudden everybody got this inspiration. When they sacrificed these oxes, suddenly everyone was inspired and they got these urges to do good. Now on Hanukkah it also happened, but on Hanukkah it happened by means of war. We had to fight a war against the Greeks. That's the holiday. The holiday of Hanukkah does not come from the Torah. It's a rabbinical holiday. It comes from below to above. Since both of these things the rabbis are enjoined, they're commanded by the Torah to make up, to make laws. So in the laws of the rabbis are also laws of the Torah, but it's a more sort of an indirect way. And in any case, both Chanukah and Sukkot have the same idea, drawing down these surrounding, encompassing levels of God's goodness and kindness and mercy to the whole entire world. But Sukkot is from the Torah and has the power from the Torah, so it wasn't necessary to have a war. And Chanukah is from the rabbis, it was necessary to have a war. But since that both of them are drawing down this level of the makifim, the surrounding, encompassing levels of godliness, therefore, Beit Shammai, they learn this to the lights of Chanukah from the axes of Sukkot. Shemitchila, that first of all, there has to be a big revelation, and then afterwards they can get less and less, etc., like the axes of Sukkot. But Beit Hillel says no. Sobri, they hold Malim B'Kodesh that we have to every day increase. What does it mean? The lo dami limud zeh miparachag. He says you're not able to learn this, the Chanukah lights. You can't learn from the axes of the holiday of Sukkot and start off big and get less. You can't do that. Kichag Sukkot, because the holiday of Sukkot, says Beit Hillel, is from the Torah. But right, and the Torah comes from what's called God's upper wisdom. Milamayla lamata, from above to below, right? The Torah is every day is simulated the Torah, on Mount Sinai. God is giving us the Torah all the time. That's what we say in our blessings. Notein Torah. God is giving the Torah. It's coming from above to below. It's a power that's coming from God. If so, the revelation, this revelation of godliness, which will harmonize and calm down the non-Jews, is drawn down on its own from above to below. Therefore, the highest levels of godliness can come and be drawn down first. You don't have to have a preparation. Who can stop God? Who can prevent to God? Yisbarech Shemo. So because the holiday of Sukkot comes from God, it comes from the Torah, so God can give a big blessing in the beginning. Right? Didn't have to work for it, didn't have to prepare the world. He gives a big blessing in the beginning. 13 oxes. So let's apply this principle also to Hanukkah, says Beit Shammai, and start off big, 8 candles. Like it says, Hayad Hashem Tiksar. Can any be, is anything, how do you say, difficult for God? He'll start off big. Which is not the case, the holiday of Chanukah. The holiday of Chanukah is only from the rabbis, says Beit Hillel. Right? You're not taking this into account, Beit Shammai, says Beit Hillel. You want to start out big in the holiday of Chanukah. On Chanukah, you want to start off with 8, and this will automatically give a big knockdown to all the forces of evil and destruction in the world. And then the second day, you don't have to work so hard. Well, you can't do that on Chanukah because Chanukah is not similar to Sukkot. Sukkot is an exception. It's from the Torah. God said that we have to make an exception on this holiday of Sukkot, and we'll start off big. But all the other times, you start off small. The holiday of Chanukah is only from the rabbis. The Jews, they're the ones that drew down. They did the work so that there should be this revelation. If so, since that the holiday of Chanukah came from the work of the Jews below, the war they fought, it is impossible to reach this big revelation in the beginning. It has to happen little by little. First of all, we have to light 1 candle. We draw 1. Afterwards, we can elevate ourselves a little bit more. 2. We continue making more and more light. Dugma, like for instance, Passover, Sfirat Omer. On Passover, there was the revelation from above, right? God took us out of Egypt from what's called Melech Malchei Melachim. And then afterwards, there had to be what's called Sfirat Omer, counting the Omer. But that's we do. And that's exactly the opposite. First of all, we start off with 1 day of the Omer, and the next day we do 2. We don't say the second day, we say 2 days. In other words, what happens on the whole idea of counting the Omer, it's something like, even though it's also from the Torah, but that's something like Hanukkah. We have to do it. God says you have to do it yourself. In other words, every day is drawn down a higher revelation than the day before it. Not like the oxes of Sukkot, that every day is less than the day before it. The second day of Sfirat HaOmer, counting, for those of you who don't know what Sfirat HaOmer is, it's also a commandment of the Torah that we have to count 50 days between Passover and the holiday of what's called Shavuot. Shavuot is really the holiday of weeks. Shavuot means weeks. We have to count 7 complete weeks. Every day you count another day. And on the last day, that's already, that's 7 times 7 is 49. The last day is Sukkot, the holiday when the Torah was given. But it goes from, we have to do the work. It says we have to go from below to above. The first day you count 1 day. The second day is 2 days. Third day is 3 days, not the third day. Every day is including all the days from before it. So that's like what Hillel said. Hillel said the first night you light 1 candle, and the second night you'd light 2 candles. So it comes out that that's counting of the Omer, which this really came from, which this is an arousal from above, which comes from us, from an arousal from below that we do. This draws down little by little the light. That's just like Hanukkah. First of all, 1 candle, and afterwards. That's what Beit Hillel says we should do. Okay, but as long as we're comparing it to the counting of the Omer, let's the counting of the Omer starts off something like what Beit Shammai wanted. Passover. Passover, there was a big deal, a revelation from above that all the light was drawn on Passover, this big revelation of God. Just like what the oxes of the holiday. First of all, 13 is drawn now. That's why Beit Shammai says it should be. But then afterwards, we have to do the work on our own. So if so, Passover, that's something like what Beit Shammai says, that it comes from the Torah. So God makes a big blessing. In the beginning, he does the whole thing himself. But then afterwards, this commandment of counting the Omer, that's something what Beit Hillel said, that we have to do the work. So we start off small and we get bigger and bigger. The first day, 1 day, second day, 2 days. Now we can understand from this what it says in the Kabbalah book, what's called Pri Eitz Chaim. It's a book of written by Chaim Vital, explaining the ideas of the Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the Ari. It says in Sfirat HaOmer, we draw down the surrounding levels of godliness from what's called God's understanding, Ema. But the inside levels, we don't have power to do. Only the time of the Holy Temple. That's what it says. That's the whole idea of the 7 shepherds. That's what's called inner inspiration. That's like the menorah, which was in the Holy Temple, which is not the case now. Now we draw down a higher level, which is called the surrounding level of godliness, which this is the 8 anointed men. Okay, what does this mean to us all the time, day to day? We've sort of explained this, how it relates to Chanukah, the commandment of Chanukah, but day to day, this is very important. There's 2 attitudes that a person should have, a Jew should have when he does the commandments. 2 attitudes. One attitude is that each commandment is separate. Each commandment has its own charm, its own specific blessing. Each one is different. The other attitude is, and therefore you should understand as much as the commandments as you can. You should delve into them. You learn Chassidut, you learn Kabbalah, you learn the laws, you learn the details, because each and every commandment is different, and you have to know how each one is different. Each one is the will of God, right? Something like in the human body, the heart is different from the brain is different from the lungs is different from the stomach is different from the liver. Each and every one of the limbs is different. Similarly, each and every Commandment is different. That's one way. But in addition to this, there has to be what's called a surrounding way of serving God. The first way is individual. It's more internal, details. The second is a more general way of serving God, namely that all the commandments are the exact same thing. They're all the will of God. They're the will of God. The details are important, but the reason I'm doing the details is because God wants me to understand the details. But the main thing in the commandments is not the details. The main thing in the commandment is you have to know the details. Of course, the details are important, but the main emphasis has to be on the godliness, and that's the same in all the commandments. Each one has its advantages, right? The one has the advantage is the first one has the advantage that each thing is individual, it's specific, right? You pay attention. That's like a good worker. He knows all the details. And the other one, the advantage is loyalty, where your loyalty is. Where is your inspiration, right? Like, let's say a teacher in a school, he loves the children. He really loves them, but doesn't know how to teach. But he loves them. Then there's another teacher, he hates the kids, just hates them, but he really knows how to teach very well. He could care less about it. He just wants to go home and have a beer or something like that. But he's got to make money. So he teaches the kids, and he's good at it. He teaches the kids, right? So the kids have a terrible example of a human being, but they have they learn they learn the material very well. On the other hand, you have a teacher that loves the kids, just loves them. They have a wonderful example from, they all come out from the school and they think the school is so wonderful. What did you learn? Nothing. I don't remember. Of course, there has to be both. Same thing in Judaism. You have to have both. You have to have a tremendous love of God and know that all the commandments are the same. They're just the will of God. But you also have to know the details. So he says that's the whole idea of these 7 anointed men. I mean, the 8 anointed men and the 7 shepherds. The 7 shepherds, that's like the details, how it comes into us. And the 8, that's the surrounding level of serving God. And we'll see what, now we can understand this whole idea of Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shamayim, the acceptance of the yoke of the kingship of heaven. Shekadma, that comes before the Ol Mitzvahs, the commandments. That's what's called accepting the yoke of the kingship of heaven. What does that mean? Whatever God says me to do, I'll do. Whatever God tells me to do, I'll do. I'm not listening to any details. You just tell me what to do. God says you should listen to the rabbis. I'm listening to the rabbis. Right? God says there's a criterion who can be a rabbi. I'll listen to those criteria. The rabbis tell me I have to light the candles of Hanukkah. I'll light the candles of Hanukkah. Whatever God says to do, I'll do. All the commandments are the same. God says, stand on my head, I'll stand on my head. He says to anything, I'll do it, whatever God says. That's what's called Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shamayim. Accepting the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, like an ox. They put a yoke on an ox. The ox doesn't understand the driver. He doesn't know. He just knows he has an ox. He goes wherever the driver tells him. The same thing, me. I'll say, okay, whatever God tells me to do, I'll do it, right? I don't understand God. I understand God less than the ox understands the driver. But nevertheless, I'm linked up to God. I'm accepting on myself this yoke of God. I'll do whatever God says. Okay, that's a very wonderful thing. It's also very dangerous, right? Somebody comes along and says, okay, I'm telling you what God says. God says, jump off the river. God says, you have to believe in this person. You have to believe in the sun and the moon or something like that. I'll do it, sure, anything. One way, it's a very good thing. You're willing to link up to something that's above you. On the other hand, it's terrible because you're wiping out your personality. But it's called the yoke, accepting the yoke of the kingship of heaven. Whatever God says, I'll do. And then this is before it's called the Ol Mitzvot. This is what's called the yoke of the commandments. The first one is I'm accepting God. The second one is I'm accepting the commandments, right? All the details. The details are important to me. Hainu, shu bechinas b'chol meodecha. This is the level of with all of your power. Biru nefesh ha'ba'am is refining the animal soul. Ner Hashem nishmat adam, which is called the light lamp of God, which is the soul of man. This is what's called b'chol me'odecha, serving God with all of your being. Even though that this is only a specular she'eno me'ira, even though that this is serving God with kabbalat ol malchut shamayim. I'm accepting the yoke of God, right? Whatever God says, even though this is in a way a very, very good thing. You are refining my animal soul. I'm saying I'm not going to do anything that I want. I'm only going to do what God wants. This knocks out your animal soul, right? Your animal soul says, I want the money, I want pleasures, I want this. I'm not going to do it. Oh, this is very nice. Very good. It says the Rebbe, this is what's called, it draws down what's called a light of God, which is not clear. This is before the commandments. Mitzvah Bechinas Explaklaria Hameira. This is what's called the lamp of the commandments. The commandments that brings a clear light of God into the world. This general devotion to God, this brings what's called an unclear light of God. But because of this, there will be a revelation of a higher level, etc. But when a person accepts on himself the yoke of heaven, so this is a higher level. It's true, it's not revealed. It's not revealed in the world, but he says, I'm going to do whatever God says, total devotion to God. Right? These are like simple Jews. Simple Jews, they say, whatever God says, I'll do. They don't understand anything. The rabbi tells them to do something that, on the other hand, you have the rabbi that he understands everything, but it could be that he's not as devoted as the people are. The simple devotion is a wonderful thing. The Baal Shem Tov came to bring both, that the simple people should learn the Torah and that the Torah scholars should be simple simultaneously. So there has to be both. This is what we're going to talk about tomorrow, about how this relates to the lamp of Chanukah, the wick, the oil, etc. As we'll talk about tomorrow. But today, what do we learn today? The whole purpose of the lights of Chanukah, the whole purpose of Judaism is to enlighten the world, is to subdue the evil of the world, to transform it to good. And that is represented by lights, the lights of Chanukah. And in fact, all the commandments, but especially the lights of Chanukah are there to illuminate the darkness. That's what we just finished explaining, the darkness of the Greek philosophy. So Beit Shammai compares it to the oxes of the holiday of Sukkot, which had the same exact purpose, namely to put order and blessing into the world. But the law is not like Beit Shammai, it's like Beit Hillel, that we start from below because we have to do the work on our own, from below to above. We're going to see that this is connected to what we say, the 8 anointed men and serving God, just accepting the yoke of heaven before the yoke of the commandments, as we're going to talk about, God willing, more tomorrow.